Welcome back to the deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
This time we're going way back to the beginning,
Yep.
to America's first attempt at a government,
Mm-hmm.
the Articles of Confederation.
Right.
So you guys sent us a ton of info on this topic, and it's
Yeah.
actually way more interesting than I thought it would be.
It's pretty fascinating stuff.
So to set the scene,
Okay.
it's 1777.
Mm-hmm.
The Revolutionary War is raging,
Right in the thick of it.
and all 13 colonies are
Uh-huh.
trying to become a single country.
A brand new nation.
I mean, that's got to be like herding cats.
That's a good way to put it.
Independent, freedom-loving cats.
Exactly. The Articles of Confederation were adopted
Okay.
during this chaotic time,
Mm-hmm.
trying to unite the colonies,
Yeah.
but also trying to let them keep their sovereignty.
So they wanted unity, but also independence.
Yes.
That seems like kind of a contradiction.
Well, it was
How did they think that was going to work?
it was a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
They were trying to address the concerns of those who were afraid of a strong central government. But they also knew they needed some unity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It was a tough situation.
So under the Articles, what could the government actually do?
Well,
Like, what powers did they have?
they could declare war
Okay.
and make peace.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the Treaty of Paris, which officially ended the Revolutionary War,
Yeah.
that was negotiated under the Articles.
Wow, so they actually ended the war they were fighting during?
Yep.
That's a pretty big deal.
It was a major accomplishment.
What else could they do?
They can negotiate with Native American tribes.
Okay,
They could coin money,
gotcha.
although the states could also print their own money, which caused some problems later on.
Oh, I bet. So basically a recipe for economic headaches.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, what else?
And they could establish a postal system.
Okay, so they did some pretty important things.
Right, they weren't completely powerless.
Yeah. One of the sources you sent mentioned the Northwest Ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
What was that all about?
The Northwest Ordinance was passed in 1787.
Okay.
It was a really big achievement.
Mm-hmm.
Under the Articles, it set up a system
Yeah,
for these Western territories to become states.
that's important so the country could grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was crucial for expansion.
Yeah.
And it outlawed slavery in those new territories.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it set a precedent that would have big consequences later on.
So it wasn't all bad, the Articles. I mean,
Not at all.
but we still learn about them for a reason, right?
Definitely.
I mean, they didn't last.
No.
What went wrong?
Well, the biggest problem
Okay.
was that the government couldn't collect taxes.
Wait, they couldn't tax?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
like running a lemonade stand and hoping people will pay.
Uh-huh. I like that.
But they can just walk off with your lemonade.
You can't run a government without money.
So how did they think they could run a country that way?
Well, remember, they had just fought a war against what they saw as a tyrannical king.
Yeah.
They saw taxation by a faraway government as a form of oppression.
So they were traumatized by taxes, basically.
You could say
I
that.
guess I get it.
Yeah.
But you still need money to run a country.
That's the thing.
So what happened?
What happened is
Yeah.
the government was constantly broke. They couldn't pay their debts. They couldn't raise an army.
That's a problem.
It really was.
It sounds like a recipe for instability.
Exactly.
Mhm.
It was.
What other problems were there?
Another big one
Yeah.
was the lack of uniform economic policies.
What do you mean?
Well, each state
Okay.
had its own currency
What?
and its own trade policies.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine?
It'd be chaos.
It was.
Trying to do business across state lines with
Mhm.
different currencies, tariffs, and rules.
If it was a nightmare.
It would be so frustrating.
Yeah, it really hindered economic growth.
So basically, they had economic chaos.
Yep.
On top of a broke government.
Pretty much.
To make things even worse,
Oh, yeah.
the article said that to change anything,
Mm-hmm.
you needed all 13 states to agree.
Unanimous consent.
So even if everyone agreed something was broken,
Yeah.
one state could just...
Block any changes.
That's crazy.
It made it almost impossible to fix anything.
So no wonder it failed.
Right. Yeah.
And then there was Shays' rebellion.
Oh, yeah.
One of the sources you sent said it was a turning point.
Absolutely.
So tell me about it.
Well, in 1786,
Okay.
a bunch of farmers in Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
led by this guy, Daniel Shays,
Yeah.
they rebelled against the state government.
Why?
They were in debt.
Okay.
They were facing economic hardship.
So they were struggling.
Yeah. And they felt like the government wasn't doing anything to help them.
So it was like an enough is enough kind of moment.
Exactly.
What happened?
Well, the rebellion
Mm-hmm.
really showed how weak the central government was under the Articles.
They couldn't stop it.
They could barely even raise a force to fight back.
Oh, wow.
They had to rely on state militias and private money to put down the rebellion.
That must have been a huge wake-up call
It was.
for anyone who still thought the Articles could work.
It showed everyone
Yeah.
that the Articles just weren't working.
Something had to change.
It was clear. Yeah, Shays' Rebellion was a real eye-opener.
They must have scared people.
It did, especially the elites.
Yeah.
They were trying to build this new nation, and it was already falling apart.
Right. Not exactly the shining city on a hill.
Not at all.
So what happened? Did they just scrap the Articles and start over?
Well, not right away.
Okay.
In 1787, they called a convention in Philadelphia.
Okay.
The original goal was to revise the Articles, fix the problems.
Yeah.
But this one delegate, James Madison,
Oh, yeah. James Madison, the father of the Constitution.
that's the one.
I've heard he was a pretty smart guy.
Oh, he was brilliant.
Yeah.
When he got to the convention, he was already convinced that the Articles were just too broken. He thought they couldn't be saved.
Wow.
He said they should throw them out and create a whole new system.
With a stronger central government.
Exactly.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It was.
What did the other delegates think?
It was a mixed bag.
Yeah,
Some were skeptical,
I bet.
especially the ones from the smaller states. They were afraid of giving the federal government too much power.
Right. They didn't want another King George situation.
Exactly.
But what about the others?
The others, especially the delegates from larger states,
Okay.
they were more open to Madison's ideas.
Oh, why?
Well, they felt like the Articles weren't fair to them.
They didn't have enough power.
Right.
So how did they bridge the divide?
Lots of debate,
Oh, I bet.
lots of arguments.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually they realized they needed to compromise
They had to.
if they wanted to make a nation that worked.
Yeah.
They spent months working on it,
Really?
talking, arguing,
Yeah.
making concessions.
Wow, they were literally creating a nation.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
From scratch.
They were dealing with real problems,
Yeah.
trying to build a system that would actually last.
They knew failure wasn't an option.
Right. The stakes were incredibly high.
So what were some of the big compromises they made?
Well, one of the most famous
Yeah.
was the Great Compromise.
I've heard of that.
It was all about how states would be represented in the legislature.
Okay.
The bigger states,
Mm-hmm.
they wanted representation based on population.
That makes sense.
More people, more representatives.
Right.
But the smaller states,
Yeah.
they wanted each state to have equal representation.
Regardless of size.
Exactly.
So how did they solve that?
They came up with a bicameral legislature.
Bicameral meaning?
2 chambers,
Okay.
2 houses.
Gotcha.
The House of Representatives,
Mm-hmm.
which is based on population,
Okay, so the big states were happy?
and the Senate,
Yeah.
where each state gets 2 senators.
No matter how big or small.
That's right.
So everyone was happy.
It was a compromise.
Right, everyone got something.
It balanced the power between big and small states.
So they took the two birds, one stone approach?
You could say that.
Okay, what about taxes? I can't imagine the states were happy to give up that power.
You're right, that was a big issue. But in the end,
Yeah.
everyone agreed that the federal government needed money
To function.
to actually do its job.
Yeah,
So the Constitution gave Congress the power to tax
directly.
directly.
Wow, that's a big change.
It was, but they put in some safeguards.
What do you mean?
Well, a lot of people were worried about the government abusing this power.
Right, becoming tyrannical.
Exactly.
So they didn't want to give the federal government too much power.
It was a delicate balance.
No, what did they do?
They created a system of checks and balances.
Uh-huh.
They divided the government into 3 branches.
Legislative, executive, and
That's right.
judicial.
Exactly.
The good old separation of powers.
That's right.
I remember learning about that.
It's a pretty important concept.
So each branch gets its own powers,
Right.
and they can limit each other's power,
Exactly.
like a system of checks and balances.
That's it.
So Congress can pass laws,
Yes.
but the president can veto them,
Yeah.
and the president appoints judges,
Right.
but the Senate has to approve them.
That's how it works.
And the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
They can declare laws unconstitutional.
Excellent.
So no one branch can become too powerful.
It's a pretty clever system.
It is. It's like they were thinking way ahead.
They were trying to learn from the mistakes of the past.
So the Constitution was a big improvement over the Articles.
In a lot of ways, yes.
It sounds like
It created a more stable and balanced government.
one that has lasted for centuries.
That's right.
But I thought there was a lot of opposition to the Constitution.
There was
Weren't some people worried about a strong central government?
definitely the Anti-Federalists.
Who are they?
They were the folks who opposed the Constitution.
Okay.
They thought it gave too much power to the federal government.
And not enough to the states.
Right. They were afraid of tyranny.
So what did they want?
They wanted a Bill of Rights.
To protect individual liberties.
Exactly.
What about the Federalists?
They were the ones who supported the Constitution,
Okay.
led by guys like Alexander Hamilton and James Madison.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
They argued that a stronger national government was necessary
To keep things running smoothly.
to ensure stability and unity.
So it was a pretty intense debate.
It was. It went on for months.
Really?
In newspapers, pamphlets, public forums.
Wow.
In the end,
Yeah.
the Federalists won
So the Constitution was ratified?
in 1788.
But what about the Anti-Federalists?
Well, as a compromise,
Okay.
they added a Bill of Rights.
To the Constitution.
Right, shortly after ratification.
So even though the Federalists won,
Uh-huh.
they still had to compromise.
They did, to get everyone on board.
So compromise was a big theme throughout this whole process.
It was essential.
Yeah.
It's how they were able to create a new nation.
Out of 13 very different colonies.
It's pretty remarkable.
It is when you think about it.
They had to put aside their differences
Yeah.
to create something bigger than themselves.
And it worked.
It did. The Constitution is still the law of the land.
It's a pretty amazing legacy.
It is, and that spirit of compromise,
Yeah.
that commitment to finding common ground, that's
Uh.
one of the most important legacies of the Constitution.
We've talked a lot about the problems with the Articles.
Yeah.
But did they have any positive legacies?
They did, actually.
Really?
Despite their flaws,
Uh-huh.
they established some important principles.
Like what?
Well, for one,
Yeah.
they created a framework for governing the Western territories.
Right. And adding new states to the Union.
Exactly.
Like we talked about before.
The Northwest Ordinance was a product of the Articles.
Mhm.
It set a precedent for westward expansion.
And it prohibited slavery in those new territories.
That's right.
That's a pretty big deal.
It was. It showed that the ideal of freedom could be expanded to new lands.
So even though the Articles failed,
Yeah.
they contain some important ideas.
They did.
Ideas that shaped America.
It served as a learning experience.
A blueprint for what not to do.
In a way, yes.
So the Articles were a necessary stepping stone
You could say that.
on the path to the Constitution.
They were a rough draft.
That helped them create the masterpiece.
I like that analogy.
It makes you wonder what would have happened if they hadn't tried the Articles first.
Right. If they hadn't learned from their mistakes.
Would America even exist as we know it today?
That's a great question.
It is, isn't it?
It's impossible to know for sure.
But we can learn from the past.
We can, and we should.
The Articles show us how hard it is to build a nation.
And how important it is to be willing to change,
To adapt.
to compromise.
To keep striving for a more perfect union.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the Articles, all their problems, and how they eventually got replaced by the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's time for Articles versus Constitution.
Right.
A head-to-head matchup.
Let's do it.
What were the biggest differences?
Well, one of the most obvious differences is the structure of the government.
Okay, how so?
The Articles just had one branch of government,
Really?
just the Confederation Congress.
And that was?
It was a unicameral legislature,
Meaning?
one chamber,
Okay.
and every state got one vote.
So it didn't matter how big or small the state was?
Nope. A tiny state like Rhode Island
Uh-huh.
had the same power as a huge state like Virginia.
I can see how that would cause problems.
It did. It led to a lot of tension.
The big states must have felt like they got a raw deal.
Exactly. They felt like their interests weren't being represented fairly.
So how did the Constitution fix that?
The Constitution created a bicameral legislature.
Bicameral means?
Two chambers.
Right, the House and the Senate.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
The House of Representatives is based on population.
So the bigger states have more power there.
Right. They have more representatives.
But the Senate gives every state 2 senators.
That's right.
So the small states still have a voice.
It's a compromise.
2 birds, 1 stone.
Yeah, pretty much.
What about taxes? That was a big problem with the Articles.
Oh, yeah, huge problem.
The government couldn't even collect taxes.
They were constantly broke.
So how did the Constitution change that?
The Constitution gave Congress the power to tax
Directly
on the people.
Wow, that's a big change.
It was, but it was necessary.
So the government could actually function?
Exactly. They could pay their debts, fund an army.
All the things a government needs to do.
Right.
But giving the government that much power, it must have made some people nervous.
Oh, absolutely.
They probably thought it would lead to tyranny.
The memory of King George was still fresh in their minds.
Right, taxation without representation and all that.
So the Founding Fathers knew They had to be careful.
They couldn't just ignore those concerns
Nope. They had to find a balance.
between a strong government and protecting individual liberty.
Exactly.
So how did they do it?
Checks and balances.
The separation of powers.
That's it.
Tell me more.
They divided the federal government into 3 branches.
Legislative, executive, and judicial.
You got it.
Each branch with its own powers.
And each branch can limit the power of the other 2.
It's like a 3-way tug of war.
Kind of, yeah.
So Congress can pass laws, but the president can veto them,
Right.
and the president appoints judges,
Yes.
but the Senate has to confirm them,
That's right.
and the Supreme Court. They can declare laws unconstitutional.
Exactly.
So it's like a system of safeguards.
It is. It's designed to prevent any one person or group from becoming too powerful.
That's pretty smart.
It's one of the reasons why the Constitution has lasted so long.
So the Constitution was a big improvement.
It definitely addressed a lot of the weaknesses of the Articles.
It sounds like it.
And it's been pretty successful, wouldn't you say?
I mean, it's still the law of the land.
It's a testament to the Founding Fathers.
They really learned from their mistakes.
They did. They created a system that has stood the test of time.
It's easy to criticize the Articles now,
Yeah.
but we have to remember the context. They were trying to create something brand new.
A new form of government.
No one had ever done this before.
It was uncharted territory.
They were bound to make mistakes.
And they did, but they learned from them.
The Articles were a bold experiment.
A necessary step in the evolution of American democracy.
They showed us what not to do.
And they gave us a foundation to build on.
I think that's a good place to wrap things up.
Yeah, I think so too.
So there you have it, folks.
The Articles of Confederation.
America's first attempt at self-government.
A fascinating and ultimately crucial chapter in American history.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive.
And learned something new along the way.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time.